My wife didn't say our marriage was falling apart. She didn't say she was unhappy. She didn't even do the classic "we need to talk" thing that makes your stomach drop like a broken elevator. No. She smiled. That should have been my first warning. It was a Tuesday evening. I was on the couch, halfway through a documentary about people who build cabins in Alaska for fun, which honestly already felt like a safer life choice than marriage. She walked in with that overly calm energy. "You know what I've been thinking?" she said. That sentence has never once led to anything good in human history. I muted the TV. "Should I be scared?" She laughed. "No, I think we should invest in our relationship." There it was. The corporate buzzword. Invest. Relationships don't invest. Stocks invest. Crypto scams invest. Couples either argue about dishes or quietly die inside. There's no quarterly growth. "In what way?" I asked carefully. "There's this seminar for couples. It's about confidence, leadership, communication, real transformation." I blinked. Transformation? Are we turning into butterflies or just emotionally exhausted caterpillars? She ignored that. "My friend Kelly went. She said it saved their marriage." "Sounds intense," I said. "It's amazing," she insisted. "They do live exercises, real breakthroughs. People come out completely different." "Different how? Like, divorced?" She rolled her eyes. "You're being cynical." I wasn't being cynical. I was being historically accurate. She sat next to me. "I just think we've been stuck. You've been comfortable." Ah, there it was. The polite version of boring. "Comfortable is underrated," I said. "Airplanes try to land comfortably. Nobody wants a dynamic landing." "I'm serious," she said. "I want us to grow." Whenever someone says grow, someone else ends up emotionally pruned. I shrugged. "What exactly happens at this thing?" She lit up. "Too much. They bring couples on stage and coach them live." I slowly turned my head. "On stage?" "Yes. It's very empowering." "To whom?" I asked. She laughed again, like I was adorable. "That's never a good sign either." "It's interactive. You have to be open." I leaned back. "So, we sit in a room with strangers, and a motivational guy tells me how I'm doing life wrong?" "He helps," she corrected. "Does he also sell a $999 online course?" She ignored that. "I already bought the tickets." "Already?" I asked. "They were almost sold out." "What kind of tickets?" I asked. She hesitated. "VIP." I stared at her. "VIP? For therapy?" "It's not therapy. It's therapy with lighting. They include priority seating, which means we sit closer to the emotional firing squad." She sighed. "Can you just try? For me?" And that's how it always works. Not logic, not persuasion, just the emotional version of a hostage negotiation. "For you," she repeated. I should have said no. A confident, assertive no. The kind self-help books pretend men say. Instead, I exhaled. "Fine, but if I end up hugging strangers, I'm billing you." She smiled, victorious. "You won't regret it." That sentence should have been warning number 2. The week leading up to the seminar was strange. She kept mentioning it. Try to be open-minded. Don't shut down. Be honest when they ask questions. When they ask questions, plural. I noticed she also told her friends. I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, we're going Saturday." "I know. He doesn't know what to expect. It'll be good for him." I walked in and grabbed water. She smiled at me like I was a surprise guest at my own life. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," she said quickly. Whenever someone says nothing, it's always something, usually expensive. Saturday came. We drove downtown to one of those hotels that host corporate events and weddings where the bride looks stressed and the groom looks like he forgot his own name. The lobby was packed. Couples everywhere, some holding hands, some not making eye contact, some already arguing quietly, which felt reassuring. At least we weren't the only ones preloading conflict. We checked in. They gave us badges with our names. Nothing says romance like wearing a plastic tag that identifies you as emotionally under construction. The ballroom doors opened. Loud music, bright lights, stage, giant screens. This wasn't therapy. This was a concert for people whose love languages had expired. We found our seats. Front section. Of course. You got us close, I said. She smiled proudly. Better experience. Yeah, I muttered. Closer to the blast radius. The host walked on stage. Tall, loud, perfect hair. The kind of guy who probably wakes up motivated. "Welcome!" he shouted. The crowd cheered. I leaned toward my wife. "If he asks us to high-five strangers, I'm leaving." She elbowed me. "Stop." The host talked about breakthroughs, about truth, about courage. Then he said it. "Today, we're going to do live coaching, real couples, real honesty." My wife straightened in her chair. That was warning number 3. He scanned the audience. "Who here is ready to transform their relationship?" Hands went up. My wife's hand shot up like she was volunteering for free money. I slowly turned my head. "You're kidding," I whispered. She didn't look at me. The host pointed. "You, in the front." "Of course." She grabbed my arm. "We're going," she whispered. "We're not," I whispered back. She was already standing. And that's how, 10 seconds later, I found myself walking toward a stage, under bright lights, surrounded by cheering strangers, wondering how a quiet Tuesday night had escalated into public emotional gladiator combat. And I had a very strong feeling this was about to get interesting. She didn't drag me. That would have been too obvious. She just moved forward with the calm determination of someone who had already decided how the movie ends. I followed because standing there alone while everyone watched felt worse than stepping into whatever circus awaited on stage. The steps creaked under my shoes. Bright lights hit my face, and suddenly I couldn't see half the room, which honestly was probably merciful. If I'd seen 300 people staring, I might have developed a sudden interest in emergency exits. The host shook my hand like I had just won something. "Welcome. What's your name?" "Daniel," I said. "And this is?" "My wife," I replied. She jumped in. "I'm Laura." He beamed. "Give them a hand." The audience clapped. Not warmly, more like politely curious. The same energy people have when a magician brings volunteers on stage and everyone silently wonders who's about to be embarrassed. We stood in the middle. 2 chairs appeared. We sat. The host crouched slightly, holding his mic like a weapon. "So, how long have you two been together?" 7 years, I said. "Married?" 5. He nodded dramatically. "Perfect. Enough time for patterns to form." Patterns. I suddenly felt like a lab rat. He turned to my wife. "What made you raise your hand today?" She smiled. Not nervous, not unsure, confident. "I think we're stuck." There it was, publicly now. The host nodded. "Stuck how?" She glanced at me briefly, then back at him. "He's comfortable." I leaned into the mic slightly. Comfortable is better than chaotic. Airlines don't advertise turbulent but passionate. The audience chuckled. The host grinned. "Okay, I like him. He's funny." My wife smiled, but it was tight. Like humor wasn't part of her plan. He turned back to her. "When you say comfortable, what do you mean?" She hesitated, performing hesitation, then sighed. "I just feel like I'm carrying the energy in the relationship." The audience made that sympathetic murmur. The one that says, "Oh, here we go." I tilted my head. "Energy? I pay the electricity bill. That counts." A few laughs again. The host raised his hand playfully. "Let's stay with her for a second." She leaned forward, warming up. "He doesn't take initiative." I blinked. "I planned our last vacation." "You booked flights," she said. "That's how vacations start." The host chuckled. Okay. He looked at her. "What else?" She exhaled like she'd been waiting. "He's very passive." There it was. First clean hit. I nodded slowly. I prefer non-chaotic. She smiled at the audience. See? He jokes instead of addressing things. The host turned to me. Is that true? Absolutely, I said. Humor is cheaper than therapy. The crowd laughed louder. For a moment, it felt balanced, like we were just two people bantering. Then she shifted. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm the man in the relationship. The room reacted. That little collective ooh that people make when someone says something sharp enough to cut. I raised my eyebrows. If that's the case, I'd like to formally request half your salary. More laughter, but softer now. The host looked interested. That's strong. Tell me more. She nodded. I make decisions. I push us forward. If I didn't, we'd just coast. I leaned toward her. Coasting is underrated. Cars don't floor it all the time. She ignored me. He's kind, she continued. But kindness isn't leadership. The host repeated it slowly. Kindness isn't leadership. He loved that line. I could see it. He mentally highlighted it for Instagram quotes. I shrugged. Depends. Napoleon wasn't kind. That didn't end great either. A few people laughed, but the energy was shifting. They weren't laughing with me anymore. They were waiting. The host nodded. Let me ask you directly. He turned to her. On a scale from 1 to 10, how fulfilled do you feel with him as a partner? My wife inhaled. I watched her face. There was no panic, no uncertainty. She'd thought about this. She smiled slightly. As a person? He's great. Pause. As a partner? Another pause. The dramatic kind. Maybe a 5, the audience murmured. I nodded slowly. 5 is average. I've always liked consistency. The host leaned in. And as a man? There it was, the unnecessary follow-up. She laughed, not nervous, just amused. 4. The audience reacted louder this time. Someone in the back actually whistled. I felt the heat of the light suddenly more intensely. Funny how numbers can feel heavier than insults. I tilted my head. Do I get extra credit for attendance? A few laughs, but now it felt like I was telling jokes at my own roast. The host turned to her. Why a 4? She started counting on her fingers. He avoids conflict. I resolve conflict, I said, by not escalating it. She continued. He's not ambitious enough. I have a job. You have a routine. I like food. Routine provides food. The audience laughed again, but softer. She kept going. He doesn't lead. I leaned into the mic. I drove here. She didn't smile this time. The host watched both of us like he was watching tennis. Then he asked the question that shifted everything. If you had the chance to choose again, knowing what you know now, would you still pick him? Silence. My wife looked at me, then at the audience, then back at him. She laughed lightly. I mean, I'd probably explore my options first. The room exploded with reactions, some laughter, some shocked gasps, a couple of wows. And for the first time, I stopped smiling. Not because I was hurt, but because I realized something very simple. This wasn't spontaneous. She hadn't come here to grow. She came here to demonstrate. And suddenly, standing under those lights, I wasn't a husband. I was a case study. And she wasn't done yet. I wish I could tell you there was some dramatic pause where the room sensed the line had been crossed and everyone suddenly became decent human beings. That is not what happened. The host smiled in that polished, professionally concerned way. Explore your options, he repeated. That's honest. Amazing how cruelty gets rebranded when there's stage lighting. He turned toward me. How does that land for you? I looked at him, then at her, then out at the blurry crowd beyond the lights. How does it land? I said. Like economy class with no legroom. A pocket of laughter. My wife crossed one leg over the other and adjusted the microphone. I'm not trying to be mean, she said. I'm trying to be real. Ah, I said, nodding. The official slogan of every unnecessary public performance. A few more laughs. The host grinned. But I noticed something else now. He wasn't moderating, he was feeding it carefully, the way someone feeds a fire just enough oxygen to keep it dramatic. He turned to her again. "What would a 10 look like for you?" My wife took her time. "Well, confident, decisive, strong presence, someone who can command a room." I glanced around. "So basically a Navy SEAL who also listens." The audience laughed. She didn't. "Not a clown," she said. That one got a reaction. A little meaner, a little sharper. I looked at her for a second. She liked the feeling of being right in front of witnesses. She liked having an audience confirm the version of me she had been quietly building in her head. The host stepped in again, voice lower now, more serious. "Do you feel safe with him?" The question irritated me so fast it almost made me laugh. "What does that even mean?" I asked. He held up a hand. "Let her answer." She nodded solemnly, which was a nice touch. "I feel physically safe," she said. "Emotionally, I don't always feel held." I stared at her. Held. She turned to me with the expression people use when speaking to someone who supposedly doesn't understand basic emotional vocabulary. "Yes, held, supported, led." "Led where?" I asked. "Are we invading France?" That got one of the bigger laughs, and she hated it. "What I mean," she said, "is that I'm tired of being the one who has to create momentum. If I don't push, nothing happens." Now, that sounds impressive unless you know the actual details of our life. So let me translate. By create momentum, she meant booking restaurants I paid for, planning social events I didn't care about, rearranging furniture every 6 months because apparently couches also need personal growth, and deciding that our bathroom needed warmer energy, which cost me a weekend, a drill, and most of my respect for decorative baskets. But on stage, nuance dies first. The host nodded gravely. "So you feel alone in the masculine role?" She gave him an appreciative smile. "Yes," she said. "Exactly." I looked at him. I'm fascinated by how quickly this became a TED Talk about my alleged lack of testosterone. More laughter. He pointed at me gently. "You keep going to humor. And you keep going to nonsense," I replied. Yet here we are, both committed to our process. That one landed harder than I expected. The crowd laughed, the host smiled tightly, and my wife's jaw shifted almost imperceptibly. Good. Let her feel a little friction. Because up to that point, she had been surfing the whole thing like it was her show, and I was the weak supporting character she brought in for contrast. He changed tactics. "Daniel, let me ask you something plainly. Can't wait. When your wife says she does not feel led, what do you hear?" I thought about giving him some soft answer. Something productive, something civilized. But then I looked at my wife again, and she was doing that little sympathetic head tilt. That look people wear when they want credit for publicly humiliating you in a calm tone. So I answered honestly, "I hear someone who mistakes peace for weakness." The room shifted. My wife gave a thin smile. "Peace? That's a generous description." I turned to her. "No, Laura. Chaos isn't leadership just because you're the one generating it." People in the audience made the sound people make when the tennis ball finally gets smashed instead of volleyed. The host lifted his brows. "Okay, there's some truth coming out now." I almost applauded his detective work. My wife laughed, but there was steel in it now. "You see? This is what he does. He waits until he feels cornered, then suddenly he has a voice." I looked at her. "And you waited until there was a crowd to say what you've clearly rehearsed in the car mirror." That got a full-body reaction from the room. She leaned toward me. "I did not rehearse anything." "No," I said. "Of course not. You just happened to raise your hand in under half a second and had a numbered performance review ready." The host tried to slide in. "Let's not attack." "I'm not attacking," I said. "I'm participating." I was under the impression that was the whole attraction. The audience laughed again, and I saw the host make the tiniest decision. Either regain control now, or risk me becoming more interesting than his framework. He turned the spotlight back to her. Laura, tell him directly. What's the hardest thing about being married to him? She didn't hesitate this time. It's lonely. I let that sit for a beat. Then I asked very calmly, lonely in what way? She seemed almost surprised I asked instead of joked. So she answered, I feel like I'm married to a man who is always adjacent to life. You're there, but you don't step into anything. You don't take charge. You don't make me feel like I can lean. That one was built for applause, and she got some. I rubbed my thumb along the edge of the microphone and said, interesting. She gave a small shrug, like she had simply submitted honest feedback. So let me get this straight, I said. You want a man who takes charge and gives you something to lean into. She nodded. Yes. I looked at the audience. That's incredible. Because at home, this woman cannot commit to a place for dinner without forming a bipartisan committee. The room cracked. She stared at me. I kept going. Last month I said, let's go to the Italian place. She said, I don't know. What do you feel like? I said Italian. She said, I could do sushi. I said, okay, sushi. She said, no, maybe that's too heavy. 45 minutes later, we ordered salad and watched a documentary about minimalism in silence. The audience was laughing now, more freely than before. Even the host smiled. Laura's expression changed. Because jokes are cute until they start creating witnesses for your own nonsense. She leaned in, voice controlled. This is exactly the problem. You reduce everything with humor so you never have to be accountable. And you inflate everything with therapy language so you never have to be specific. That hit. She inhaled. Fine. Specific. Yes, I said. Try it. It's fun. Fine. You want specific? You don't inspire confidence? You don't walk into a room and make people notice you? You don't create certainty? You don't make me feel proud in the way a wife should feel proud? I nodded slowly. Ah. The host leaned forward. What's the ah? I looked at him. We found it. Found what? This isn't about how I treat her. It's about how I reflect on her. My wife scoffed. That's not true. Really? I asked. Then why does every complaint sound like something a woman says when her husband isn't performing correctly in front of other women? The audience went very still. Her face changed finally. A flicker of anger. Real anger, not stage annoyance. Wow, she said. That's your move? Blame me for wanting to admire my husband? No, I said. I'm blaming you for turning admiration into a public grading system. The host stepped in again. Let's slow this down. No, I said, turning to him with a pleasant smile. Let's actually speed it up because I'm starting to understand why VIP tickets cost more. Better view of the execution. The audience laughed again, but now it was mixed. Some were with me, some with her. Some just delighted their brunch story for tomorrow had arrived early. Laura folded her arms. You always do this. Do what? Act like you're above everything. I almost laughed. Laura, we are on a stage because you volunteered our marriage for live entertainment. The room reacted hard to that one, because again, true enough to sting. She looked toward the audience for support, then back at the host. I'm trying to save us. That was the line, the big noble line. The host nodded as if she'd said something sacred. But I was past the point where noble lines meant anything. I leaned forward and said, no, you're trying to win in public. And for the first time since we stepped on that stage, she didn't have an answer ready. The host jumped in fast, like a man trying to stop glass from breaking before it becomes his cleanup problem. Daniel, can you see how that might be hard for her to hear? Yes, I said. In fact, I suspect hearing hard things in public is suddenly becoming very educational for both of us. A few people actually clapped at that, which was messy but satisfying. Laura's voice came out colder now. You know what? Fine. I'll be even more direct. I nodded. Please, we've already rented the room. She turned fully toward me. I don't respect the version of you that I live with. That landed. No laugh, no crowd noise. Just a clean, hard line dropped in the middle of the room like a brick through glass. For half a second, I just looked at her. Then I smiled. Not because it was funny, because I finally understood the assignment. She had not dragged me on stage to fix anything. She brought me there so she could say something she wanted heard by witnesses. And if that was the game, then fine. She was no longer talking to a man trying to survive embarrassment. She was talking to a man who had just stopped being polite about it. I didn't rush to answer her. Partly because I wanted the silence to sit there, and partly because I wanted to choose words that wouldn't sound like I was defending myself. Defending yourself on stage is like explaining a joke. Technically possible, socially fatal. I leaned back in the chair and looked at her. "Fair enough," I said. The host blinked. That wasn't the emotional explosion he was hoping for. My wife frowned slightly, like she expected me to protest, argue, or at least look wounded. Instead, I shrugged. "You don't respect me," I continued, "and you thought the best place to say that was here." She lifted her chin. "I thought honesty was the point." "Honesty is great," I said. "Usually people try it in the kitchen first, less lighting." A ripple of laughter. Not loud, but enough. The host stepped in again, sensing the balance tilting. "Laura, when did you start feeling this way?" She answered immediately. "It built over time." Of course it did. Everything always builds over time, right before it detonates. "What specifically?" he asked. She gestured vaguely. "Small things. He doesn't take charge. He doesn't challenge me. He's too agreeable." I nodded. "I apologize for not creating more domestic conflict." She ignored me. "I need someone with presence," she added. I tilted my head. "I'm physically here." That got a few laughs again. She sighed. "You know what I mean." "Do I?" I asked. "Because so far presence seems to mean makes me look impressive when I talk about him." That one made the audience shift. Some chuckled, some went quiet. The host cleared his throat. "Let's bring this back to feelings." I looked at him. "We're knee-deep in them." He turned to me. "Daniel, do you feel respected?" Simple question. I thought about it for a second. "No," I said. The honesty surprised even me. The room reacted. Not dramatically, but enough. It changed the air. Suddenly I wasn't just the guy being criticized. I was the other half of something. My wife looked at me, slightly defensive now. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I asked. "You just told 300 people you don't respect me. I'm working with available data." She crossed her arms. "Respect is earned." I nodded. "Absolutely. So is privacy." The host raised his hands. Okay, let's slow down." But Laura leaned forward. She wasn't done. "You keep making this about the stage," she said. "This isn't about the stage. This is about our relationship." "Right," I said. "And yet our relationship now comes with microphones." She shook her head. "You're deflecting." "And you're performing," I replied. That landed. Not explosively, but cleanly. The host jumped in. "Let me ask you both something. What do each of you want right now?" I answered first. "I want clarity." Laura answered right after. "I want change." The host nodded dramatically. "Those aren't incompatible." "Sure they are," I said. "Change without clarity is just chaos with motivational quotes." The audience made that low, ooh sound again. The host looked delighted and stressed at the same time. Laura leaned forward, voice cooler now. "You're proving my point. You only get assertive when you feel threatened." I shrugged. "And you only get honest when you have witnesses." That one hit harder. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she was slightly off rhythm. The host tried again. "Daniel, what would leadership look like to you in this relationship?" I thought about it. "Not volunteering your spouse for a live performance review?" I said. The audience laughed louder. Laura rolled her eyes. "This is pointless." "On that we agree," I said. "We just disagree about when it became pointless." "I think it was when you raised your hand." The host shifted, trying to steer. "Laura, If he were to change one thing, what would it be? She didn't hesitate. Be decisive. I can be decisive. She looked suspicious. Like what? I smiled slightly. Well, for starters, I decisively would not bring you on stage to rate you in front of strangers. She shook her head. You're missing the point. No, I said quietly. I think I'm finally seeing it. The host leaned forward. What is it? I looked at him, then at her. This isn't about leadership. It's about image. Laura scoffed. That's ridiculous. Is it? I asked. Because everything you've said sounds less like, I want a better partner, and more like, I want a partner who looks impressive. The audience went still again. She leaned toward me. I want someone I can admire. That's fair, I said. Most people don't start by publicly lowering the person they're supposed to admire. A few people actually clapped again. Laura's patience thinned. You're twisting this. No, I said. I'm summarizing. The host raised his hands again. Let's ground this. Laura, what do you need from him emotionally? She thought for a second. I need to feel like I can lean on him. Laura, I handled our finances when you switched jobs. She said nothing. I supported you when you quit your position. I stayed calm when you panicked about moving. The audience was very quiet now. I don't lead loudly, I continued, but I lead steadily. That line hung there. Laura shifted in her chair. That's not enough, she said. I smiled slightly. So you don't want stability. You want theater. The room reacted again. The host tried one more angle. Daniel, what are you feeling toward her right now? I answered honestly. Curious. He blinked. Curious? Yeah, I said. Because I'm watching someone who says she wants respect, actively remove it, in public, and expecting that to improve things. Laura looked frustrated now. You're impossible. No, I said calmly. I'm just not agreeing. The host nodded slowly. Laura, how does that make you feel? She exhaled. It makes me feel like he doesn't understand how serious this is. I tilted my head. Oh, I understand, I said. This is extremely serious. You decided the best way to fix your marriage was to crowdsource feedback. Laura looked at me, eyes narrowed. I wanted honesty. You got it, I said. You just didn't expect it to go both directions. And for a moment, the room sat in that uncomfortable equilibrium. Two people on stage, neither backing down, the crowd unsure who to root for, and the host realizing he had accidentally created something more real than his framework could handle. And I could tell she was about to push again. The host tried to step in again. Let's refocus. But she continued, almost talking over him. I want someone decisive, strong, someone who takes control. I nodded. Okay, here's a decisive statement. Next time, if you're losing respect for me, tell me before you invite the crowd. The room went quiet. Laura didn't answer immediately, and for the first time since we got on stage, she looked unsure. I leaned forward, placed the microphone gently on my chair, and stood up. The movement surprised everyone, including the host. Daniel, he said quickly, where are you going? I adjusted my jacket. I think we've covered enough. The audience stirred. Not loudly, just that ripple of confusion when the script suddenly changes. Laura looked up at me. What are you doing? I'm making a decisive move, I said calmly. A few quiet laughs. The host stepped closer. This could be a breakthrough moment. Maybe stay and... I think the breakthrough already happened, I replied. I just don't need a crowd to process it. I stepped away from the chair. Laura's voice followed me, sharper now. So you're just walking off? I turned slightly. You wanted leadership. Sometimes leadership is leaving a bad format. The audience reacted, a mix of chuckles and silence. She frowned. You're overreacting. I shook my head. No, I'm reacting exactly once. The host tried again. Daniel, maybe take a breath. I'm good, I said. You've both been very helpful." That line got a small wave of laughter. I stepped toward the stairs. Behind me I heard Laura. "This is exactly what I mean. You shut down." I paused for half a second, then looked back. "No," I said. "Shutting down would be sitting here and pretending this was productive." Then I walked down the steps. The lights felt less intense the moment I left the stage. Funny how that works. Like stepping out of someone else's narrative. The room was quiet as I crossed between rows of chairs. People avoided eye contact, which was polite of them. Nothing says, "We just watched your marriage unravel," like pretending to check your phone. I reached the aisle. Behind me the host's voice resumed, slightly forced. "Let's give them a moment." I didn't look back. I walked straight toward the exit, pushed the door open, and the noise of the ballroom dropped behind me. Silence in the hallway. Finally. I walked a few meters, then stopped near a wall, mostly to let the adrenaline settle. Not because I doubted what I did, just because my body needed a second to catch up with the decision my brain had already made. About 30 seconds later, the door behind me opened. Laura. She stepped out quickly, heels sharp against the floor. "Are you serious right now?" I looked at her. "Yes." "You just walked off in the middle of it." "You invited me in the middle of it," I replied. She folded her arms. "That was humiliating." I almost smiled. "Interesting choice of word." She frowned. "I was trying to help us." "And I was trying to leave gracefully," I said. "We both had goals." She shook her head. "You made it worse." "No," I said calmly. "I stopped it from getting worse." She exhaled, frustrated. "You always do this. You pull away." "I walked out of a live performance review," I corrected. "That's not pulling away. That's basic self-respect." She didn't answer immediately. "You could have stayed," she said finally. "We could have worked through it." "With 300 people?" I asked. "Maybe they'll vote on who's right?" She sighed. "You're being sarcastic again." "Yes," I said. "It's either that or I start selling tickets." She looked at me more carefully now. The anger was still there, but something else too. Uncertainty. "So what now?" she asked. "Now?" I shrugged. "Now we go home. And if we talk like two adults. No microphones." She hesitated. "You're really upset." "I'm really clear," I said. We stood there for a few seconds. Behind the doors, faint applause started again. The seminar moving on, already looking for the next couple to dissect. Laura glanced toward the sound, then back at me. "I didn't think it would go like that," she said quietly. "You thought I'd sit there," I replied. She didn't deny it. I pushed off the wall. We walked toward the exit together, not touching, not arguing, just quiet. Outside, the evening air felt colder than expected. And for the first time that day, there were no lights, no crowd, no host, just two people standing on the sidewalk, finally without an audience. The drive home was quiet, not the dramatic kind. No heavy breathing, no theatrical sighs, just silence and the low hum of the engine. She looked out the window. I focused on the road. It felt less like a fight and more like something had already shifted. When we got home, she dropped her bag near the door. "So, we're just going to pretend nothing happened?" she asked. I shook my head. "No." I walked past her toward the bedroom. She followed. "Then say something." She watched as I pulled out a small travel bag from the top shelf. Her tone changed. "What are you doing?" "Packing," I said. "For what?" "I'm going to stay with my brother for a bit." That landed immediately. "You're leaving?" she said. "Yes," I answered calmly, folding a few shirts. "This is ridiculous," she said, stepping closer. "We had one argument." "This wasn't an argument," I said. "That was a presentation." She shook her head. "You're overreacting." I zipped one side of the bag. "If I stay tonight, we'll either fight or pretend. I don't want either." She crossed her arms. "So you just walk out?" "I already did that once today. Seemed effective." She didn't smile. "You're punishing me." she said. No, I replied. I'm creating space. I slung the bag over my shoulder. She stepped in front of me. This is extreme. Standing on a stage rating your husband is also not exactly moderate, I said calmly. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. Maybe, I replied. But staying right now would be worse. I walked past her into the hallway. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and headed down the stairs with the bag in my hand, feeling something strange. Not anger, not relief, just the quiet certainty that, for the first time in a while, I had actually made a decision without asking anyone for approval. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.